You know what? I realized that I use the NativeScript platform declarations, the native declarations, and I use that a lot in my videos to communicate directly with the native platform. And I use TypeScript, so this helps out. But I haven't had a dedicated video on how to set that up. Sure, I've done the setup here and there in other videos before, but I don't have a dedicated video, and that's what we're going to do today. Hey, welcome back to iScript Native. This is Alex. On today's tip, I'm going to show you how to install and use NativeScript native platform declarations. So this is if you want to communicate with the iOS underlying platform or with the Android platform. You can do that directly in NativeScript. And if you're using only JavaScript, you don't need to watch the rest of this video. You can just go ahead and do that. But if you're using TypeScript and you want to get that IntelliSense where you have code completion and API discovery right in your Visual Studio Code editor or another editor, you can use tns-platform-declarations, which is just a freely available NPM package to give you that support. So if you're using NativeScript Core with TypeScript or NativeScript with Angular or NativeScript with Vue and TypeScript, by the way, I have videos on how to set up NativeScript Vue with TypeScript. I'll link to them down below. And I'll also link some of the tutorials where I use these techniques. I'll link to it down below in the description so you can check those tutorials out. By the way, this is pretty simple to do. Let's get to it right now. So here I just have a very simple NativeScript Core project with TypeScript. This is just the Hello World template. And what we're going to use is NativeScript platform declarations. So that's the TNS platform declarations module available on NPM. Here it is. It's very much up to date because it's updated by the NativeScript team all the time. This gives you the instructions on how to use it. So if you prefer reading, you can just read the instructions here and skip the video. But I'm going to show you how to do this. So the first step to do is install that NPM package. So if we take a look at package.json, we don't have that in here. I'm going to press Control backtick to get into the terminal here. I'm using Visual Studio Code, by the way. And I can say npm install tns platform declarations -- save dev because it's a dev dependency. So you don't need this during runtime. It only works during development time and it only helps you there. Now it's been installed and you can see it here in my package.json file. So right now, if we go to a code file and we try to use the iOS native API, for example, the application, the global application is a UI application. And as you can see, we don't have IntelliSense, we don't have code completion, and it's not recognizing this. So there's a couple more steps we need to do. By the way, you can always go to the iOS documentation, the developer docs right here, and read through their APIs and see what everything is. So there is a UI application right there, and that's what we're trying to use. So the next step that TNS Platform Declarations requires is to actually reference the modules that you've just installed, and we provide the reference to both iOS and Android. Now, if you know you're going to be using iOS, then you can just use this line right here. And if you know you're going to be using just Android, you can just use that line right there. I usually just reference both of them because I might reference one or the other. And if you already have it installed, why not just have both of these in your references file? So I'm going to copy these two lines of code, head out back to my root folder of the project and create a new file called references.d.ts. And as you know, TypeScript declaration files are .d.ts files. So here I'm going to paste those two lines of code. And now my project has references pointing to those files. If you've never seen those files before, we can go to Node Modules and then find TNS Platform Declarations right here. You can see that we have an Android folder and an iOS folder, and there's a ton of stuff in there. There's so many declarations because we have to cover a lot of ground. There's been a lot of development over the last 10, 12 years, maybe more, I don't know. And all these different frameworks, all these different IOA frameworks are here. There's ARKit, that's the new one, new kid on the block. And of course, there's different Android versions that are also supported here. All of them have their own platform declarations, and there's thousands of lines in each one of these files. So we're going to get to that in a second. Now, if I type UI application here, my Visual Studio Code still can't find a reference to that. So sometimes I just need to give it a little kick in the butt and reload the window in order for those declarations to be actually discovered by the editor. And now if I type in UI application, you can see that there's no problem and TypeScript is not complaining. And if I type dot after that, you can see that I have code completion. So I can discover the API, I can figure out what needs to be written, because a lot of the examples you're going to find on the internet, and of course we all copy and paste from Stack Overflow, right? At one point or another. A lot of the examples are written in Objective-C. So if you want to translate Objective-C code into JavaScript, you're going to need to know the class names. Those are not going to change. But the method names are sometimes going to be a little bit different. So for example, how do you create a new one of these? Well, you wouldn't create a new UI application, but you could create a new UI view or an instance of a UI view controller. You don't just say const vc equals new UI view controller, because that API is not available in Objective-C. In Objective-C, what you would do is UI view controller, and then you would use one of its factory methods. So you would say alloc to allocate the memory, and then you would say init, and then either just init or init with coder or init with nibname, and so on. That's generally how these things work with iOS. If you're using Android, you would need to start out with the Android namespace, and then you have all these different namespaces inside your Android global namespace, like Android widget, and then abstract list view, and so on. The one problem you might run into is because there's so much declaration going on behind the scenes, when you start building your TypeScript, it's going to take a long time to do that. And in order to avoid it taking so long, what you need to do is go to your tsconfig file, and you want to skip building the libraries. Instead, you just wanted to focus on building your code. So you need to add a flag here called skip libcheck and set that to true. You're telling TypeScript compiler to skip the libraries and only build your code. Next time I use platform declarations, I can reference this video and not have to do it over and over again. So I'm glad you're here and you watched it, and I will see you in the next one.